Alright, so today we're going to be looking at the Maus in World of Tanks. The Maus is one of those tanks that uh, people see on the text tree. It's been in the game a long time, and it's one of the more popular tanks just because it existed in real life. It's the biggest tank in the game at 3,000 hit points. It weighs the most. It's just iconic. Not really much else to say about that. So what is it like in World Tanks? Well, like I said, it's the biggest tank. So and it's big, it's heavy, it's slow, it's got a lot of armor, and this is the reason the Maus and tanks like the Maus are the reason why gold ammo exists. It's one of those tanks that you're going to magnet a lot of gold. It's just going to happen because most people can't get through you without gold if you play it properly. So when we look at the Maus, we're going to look at the armor later on Tanks GG, and we'll talk about most of the what your problem areas are on the Maus that you need to keep hidden and try to mitigate. But to start with, you can see that that it actually has for a big tank, a big heavy tank, it actually has a pretty accurate and nice handling gun. Right, you got 1.89. If we look at the base stats here, you can see it's 2.1 aim time and 0.36, which is not bad. It's got 246 average penetration, which is low. It's definitely on the low side. But again, you're going to be brawling most of the time in this tank, getting real close, so you can aim for weak points really easily. 490 alpha, which is pretty good. It's not as good as some of the bigger tanks, but you have some DPM. You got about 2.2k DPM. So the gun's a nice feature of this tank. It's if you aim for weak points, it'll do good. You don't have to switch to heat that often, but sometimes you do, especially if you're brawling another Maus, because it's going to be really difficult for you to get through another Maus or tanks that have really heavy armor. You're really slow with the Maus. 20 kilometer top speed is pretty grueling, and you don't have very high. 9.2 specific power is not very good, so you're going to be moving slowly. Your transfer speed is slow. One thing to notice, especially, is that tanks like the T100 LT, if one of these things gets you alone, there's nothing you can do. There's like if it gets you out in the open, you cannot fight it. It's just not going to happen. You will not be able to kill it, or even get a shot at it if it plays properly. It can just fade you forever. So back to the Maus. Yeah. So I mean, you're the biggest tank in the game. You're a heavy tank. You got the armor, the hit points, and that's your role, right? If you played a heavy tank before at most tiers, you go down whatever lane you want to go down. You get to the point where you set up along that, and then you hold that position. And so that comes with the stipulation about the Maus and specifically most heavy tanks that super heavies and just slow heavies in general is that no matter how like you can play this tank, if you can play this tank really good, right? You'll have if you're really good at the game, you can do well in the Maus, of course, and you'll play it very effectively. But the ceiling for the Maus and heavy tanks is not as high as the ceiling for tanks like the Object 140, the Object 430U, the Centurion's Action 10, all these mediums, and then even the simple fact is that armor health is not nearly is not the ceiling for that is not nearly as high, and you cannot clutch gains as well as you can in tanks that have speed and DPM. You just can't do it. Like there's situations in the Maus where no matter where a lot of times if you were in a medium tank, you would have a chance, but there's just nothing you can do in the Maus because you're too slow. You can't be in all the places you need to be at the same time, and you don't have any camouflage. People know where you're at, and so it's much harder to get those big big kills. It's much harder to come back from losing if you need your team to be with you in big heavy tanks most of the time. Like if you get caught out by yourself against a lot of enemies, then you're not going to do very well because you can't escape, and you can bounce for a little bit, but if you're going to get flanked. It's just going to happen. So the proper way to play this tank, it's a simple tank to play. It seems at first, right? Because like the path that you take are usually always the same. There's only like a couple options. You can't do things that you can do in medium tanks, and so you always go the same way. There's a surprising amount of amount of actions you can take that are all very subtle when you play a tank like the Maus, and things like side scraping is very important, and making the most of your armor, because even though it's the biggest tank in the game and it has a lot of armor, it's if you play it poorly, then it's like you don't have any armor. I mean, like if people know where to shoot you and you don't mitigate that, you're going to have a problem. So if we look before we go to Tanks GG, let's take a look at the consumables and our equipment and everything. So I'm using a vertical stabilizer, a gun rammer, which is like always, and a improved ventilation. You can use a toolbox. Toolbox is really good on the Maus because your tracks can take an awful lot. You get focused by artillery. Gun lane drive you don't need. Your aim time is super good. I'd say a vert stab is much better. And coated optics you could use, but again, you're a big heavy tank. Where you're going is usually the same. You can do that. You could use super heavy spall liner, but I don't think that's going to do as well for you as what I have here. Of course, consumables, it's like whatever you want. Small repair kit, small first aid kit. If you're going to be running tier 10s, I'd go ahead and start just upgrade to the large repair kit and large first aid kit. Your other option is chocolate or fire extinguisher. In general, chocolate's going to do better in the long run. Like if you use chocolate instead of fire extinguisher, you're going to have better games. You're going to have your DPMs higher, all your stats are better, and just every once in a while you get set on fire and you die, and that's sad, and like it happens. But in general, like chocolate's going to do better for you. The only thing to remember with chocolate, if you're not taking a fire extinguisher and your fuel tank gets damaged, you have to repair it. Otherwise, if it gets hit again, you're going to be set on fire. So that's a big thing to remember. So crew skills on the Maus, pretty simple. Take repairs first on all your crew because you get tracked. Getting tracked is really bad. You don't want it to happen, or it's going to happen. Getting tracked is going to happen, and you need to be able to recover from it quickly because you don't want to be burning your repair kit on your tracks if you can help it. So, yeah, repairs first, and then we can look here. Sixth Sense is not a priority on this tank. What you want to do is you want to do repairs, and then you want to get, when it's done, you want to get Brothers in Arms, and then you want to do repairs again. And then after that, you can go with Recon, Eagle Eye. You can get Sixth Sense if you want to. If we look at the Gunner, you can see, of course, Snapshot is always good. Anything to, but it's not your gun handling is pretty good in this tank, so you definitely want to save that until after you get Sixth Sense and repairs trained up all the way. Smooth ride, I would probably go with either off-road driving first, because your ground resistance is pretty terrible, and anything to increase mobility of this tank is going to help you a lot. So your radio operator, of course, you want repairs, Brothers in Arms, and then situational awareness. Eke out that view range. And finally, on your loader skills, after you train Brothers in Arms repairs, when you get your second skill to 100, you want to swap it out for safe stowage, and then continue training repairs. So pretty standard, heavy tank repairs, Brothers in Arms. So that's the equipment. You can see I'm taking 20 APCR. APCR is really important in this tank because your penetration is pretty low, and there's a lot of tanks where you're going to want that APCR because you're going to need to dispatch people reasonably fast, especially certain people who are knowledgeable about where to shoot you and spamming gold, which is going to happen to you a lot. And HE, you could probably stand to take some more HE, even because you're brawling with other tanks that are like you is what you're doing, and so being able to deal damage to people is important. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything that we can look at here. We're going to take a look at Tanks GG. We're going to look at the armor. We're going to talk about that and how to make your most use of it effectively, and then we're going to look at the statistics on VB Addict and see where this tank stacks up right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at Tanks GG. So we can see here that it's kind of the stats we already knew about. You can see that you have about 8 degrees of gun depression all around, which is mediocre. It's better than Russian, but not as good as American, like standard German stuff. So we talked about how to work Tanks GG in the last video, so we're not going to go over that too much. We're going to just focus on the Maus. So if we go over here, we click on live, and we can see, okay, so it looks pretty good. Remember, we are firing it at with the mouse's gun. We'll look at a higher penetration gun, some of the higher end stuff you're going to be having to deal with. So straight on, you can see that with the mouse's gun, if you're firing another mouse, you're going to have a hard time, because best case scenario, you're shooting right here. They're letting you shoot it at their lower plate, and you still only have a 44 to about a 38% maximum, or I'm sorry, 30% is the worst. Of course, it's closer to 50%, right? If you're being generous, chance to go through, which is just not, you don't want to do that. So that's why you switch over to APCR, and then of course you have a much better chance. But even then, you have a low chance. So against tanks that have about 240, you don't have a 100% chance. Against tanks that have 240 or less, you're pretty well armored, even if they switch to APCR and you have 310 penetration. So of course, but that's when you're shooting at the mouse. If you are the mouse, you don't want to give them that 43% chance, that 48% chance, because that's better for them than 0%. So what you do every time in the mouse is you angle your tank. And look at that. Boom. Yeah, good luck, buddy. You're not going to get through this. This becomes better. And look at this. Auto ricochet. You can even angle it some more. Of course, when you angle it some more, you can see down here, we're over angling. But our tracks and our spaced armor are helping us make sure that there's nothing going to go through here. And so we angle some more. This becomes even less of a chance. Can't go through the plate at all. They can, 20% chance. I mean, this is where you want to be. Okay, you angle it some more even, and we're still good. It's absorbed all through here. They can't hit us anywhere. Now this is 10% is the highest they got, and so this is about where you want to be. You can angle it some more. Although at a certain point you will see that they have shots here, so you kind of want to turn that back so that lowers down. And so what about that, right? And so you can see, like, if you're fighting another mouse, they're not gonna be able to do a whole lot. And so what happens if they switch to APCR though? Boom. Okay, so now we have a thing where this is 45%. We can angle that some more, and we have right here. But that's a pretty hard target, especially if you're hiding it. And what you want to do with the mouse when you fire is you want to bring your gun out like this, and that way you can like have the wall right about there, or like anywhere around here where it covers this up, and you just can't, right, when you side scribbing out, then they're not going to be able to hit you anywhere here. They have to hit like this point, and if you angle it back a little bit more, it becomes even harder to do that. This with APCR even, so your hull is pretty much well protected. I mean, they can take shots at this, but it's a crapshoot. So what they're going to do is they're going to fire APCR at your turret face, because that's a lot better. So what you want to do, and see, you can see even right here, they can fire through here, fire right here. This is much easier to go through than your hull. So what they're going to do is they're going to shoot you here. And so what you do after you fired is you turn your turret back like that. You turn it even farther away. Don't play it forward, turn it farther away. And what that does is it massively reduces their chance to go through. So what you've effectively done here is, even if they hit the best place that they can hit, they still have less than a 50% chance of going through if they're a mouse. We're using 310. This is with 311 penetration, right? So this is the ideal. This is what you do with your armor, right? Because if you're not doing that, if you're not angling your armor and you're driving out, then you're just giving them free damage on you. You don't want to do that. You want to make use of this armor as best as possible. Okay, so let's say that you're getting hit by something bigger than a mouse, right? Let's take a look at some of the bigger tank destroyers. Let's say that they're shooting at you with the Object 268 version 4, right? That's a pretty popular machine right now. So we come look here. Now this is with standard penetration. We have 293, right? So this is pretty similar to the mouses. So they're going to have pretty similar stuff. We've kind of already seen that with the APCR on the mouse. The mouse's APCR, it's pretty similar. You angle it, they're going to have a hard time going through you. What you want to do. But what happens when you get some of that, like 360? Now you have obviously this is still a hard thing to go through. Still going to have a hard time doing that. But your turret's even worse now. Look at that. So they can hit your turret. So your turret, honestly, the big weak point on the mouse is its turret cheeks right here. Here and here are where people shoot you. Because your hull is just a crapshoot most of the time. But 81% is pretty good. And the higher the penetration, the harder it gets to make use of that turret armor. Because you angle it like that, that's about as good as you're going to get. That still gives them 42%. And so, you're taking hits about 50% of the time. And what they're going to do is they're going to wait for you to turn your gun back around to fire at them. and then when you do, they're going to shoot you through the turret, and you can't be trading 650 damage with your with your 490 alpha. You're not going to win that fight. So this is why the mouse really needs help from its teammates, and with a bad team, you're going to struggle. Uh, because your arm, when people load heat, it becomes really difficult for you to fight them. Because your armor doesn't mean nearly enough. Like, you just don't have enough armor to bounce stuff. So it's about picking your fights wisely, like putting yourself in the position, and then sometimes just holding there and don't show your turret, have them just be this and have them shoot, and make it where they wait for them to shoot and then turn out, fire, and turn back. Right? You have to mitigate the amount of damage you're taking actively. And you can't just be like, oh, I'm in the mouse, I'm invincible. No, you're not. You're definitely not invincible. So, and then of course, if we look at even higher, like let's take a look at the Jagdpanzer E100 with its 420 millimeter, right? It loads heat. You're just gonna take damage from it, right? 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. You angle, it's just gonna, but of course, once it's fired, you've taken your damage. Your team can move in on it. There are a couple of tanks you just can't do a whole lot against, mostly the Jagdpanzer, and there's those tanks where it's really high. But you're not going to be fighting these tanks, because these tanks, unless they're really bad, they don't brawl a whole lot. Like, the Jagdpanzer can a little bit, but the tanks you're going to be fighting are the other heavy tanks, right? So, what's really powerful? Of course, the one problem is Type 5 heavies. These things have armor like the mouse, but they're really skillless, and they'll just derp HE at you, and it will suck because you'll have to load heat to get through them, and they're still going to be doing more damage with their HE than you are going to be doing with your heat, and it's a sad fact of life that the tanks like this are in the game and that they exist. But it's you just take your damage. You got into a game with a Type 5 heavy on the enemy team. You're going to have to hope that your team understands that and helps you take those tanks down. So what else? Well, we have, let's say we have the new one. Where's the new IS-7 is a big one that you're going to be fighting. Where's the IS-7 at here? Here it is. All right, so let's take a look at the IS. So the IS-7 has 250 millimeters of penetration. It's slightly better than the mouse, but its penetration on its APCR is slightly worse than the mouse. So when you're playing its IS-7, one of the most popular machines at tier 10, then and you use your armor properly there, man, he's gonna have a hard time getting through your tank, and your rate of fire is faster, and you're more accurate, so you can aim for weak points better. You are dangerous against tanks like the IS-7. This is the tank. These are the type of tanks that they're gonna have a real hard time hurting you, and you're going to your armor is gonna be made very effective against them, as long as you use it properly. Because if you turn back and you let them hit you here, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good your armor is on the rest of the tank if they shoot you through the turret. Again, that's where they're going to shoot you. That's where they shoot every time. So making sure you learn your angles and learn how far to angle. So if you, right, because this is the view that you usually take on your tank. So if you want to turn it right, so where, if we want it to be right about there, right, is what we want the enemy to see. So if we turn it up, you can see that that's the angle you want them to hit your thing at. Okay, so right about there. You want them to hit your tank at that angle. That's where you want to angle your tank. So you set your tank, you cover up that lower part right here. You cover this up, and by side scraping or by just angling it. Right, if you angle it, it becomes a lot harder for them to do damage to, because it's the same thickness. It's just a different angle. So if you angle it, then it doesn't really matter if you have cover here. Right, that's one thing about the mouse, is that you don't need you can side scrape. If you angle properly, you don't need a building in front of you. Like a lot of tanks, to cover up your hull, because your lower plate, because it's still the same thickness basically. It's just making sure that you angle that turret properly. And then when they bounce, then you turn back and you slam them one, and then you turn back and you bounce some more. And that's what you do. You're the tank, and you want to take the damage, and then you hold the line. But you have to hope, because if your team does bad on the other side of the map, they do bad anywhere. You're not a medium tank. You can't carry it back from a losing position nearly as easily. And that's just the way it is, right? So you do well, you do the damage that you can, and you try to win. Okay, so let's take a look at the statistics. So what we have here is, these are the statistics, pretty similar to last time, of course. The Progetto M40 mod 465 top right now. Then the Object version 4, Object 268 version 4. Then the 430, which we reviewed last time. And so we scroll down and we can see that the, where's the mouse at? I missed it. It's higher than that, I know it is. Where? I can't see it. There it is, 24. The mouse has gone down a little bit. It was higher. Now this is global win rates, so it's about middle of the road here. Global win rates of all these tanks. So let's take a look at, first things first, let's take a look at only heavies and see how it stacks up to other heavies. So other heavies, of course, you have the AMX M4, which is a small data set. I feel like this is going to go down. I don't think this is staying here. Type 5, yeah, it's the Type 5. 277 is doing really well right now. It's new. It's like fast, heavy, armor, speed. You know, this is what is winning games right now. Object 705A is a nice, hard nut to crack. It's like the mouse, but it doesn't have some of the problems as the mouse has. But it's not as armored as the mouse. And covering up slower plates is a lot bigger of an issue. Panzer 7, Super Conqueror is very good. WZ5A, of course, and then they have the mouse. So you're okay, right? You're 8 out of 16 on the heavy tanks. It's the mouse, right? It's what you see is what you get. So, but let's go back to type, and then so this is global. Let's take a look at the NA server because that's the server that I'm playing on. See how it's doing there. So we look here. The NA server is very different. We have a lot less games. There's not nearly as people on the NA server as there are on the EU server. So we can see that on the NA server, the mouse is 23. So it's still about the same. It's doing a little worse overall. But yeah, so I mean the mouse, yeah, I mean it's not the best tank in the game at tier 10. It's not the worst thing in the game at tier 10. It's the mouse, right? So that's pretty much all there is to say about it as far as statistics go. Let's head back to World Tanks and we'll see if there's anything else that I missed. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, like I said, it's the mouse. It's a fun tank, especially if you don't want to think a whole lot. Other than like once you learn the angles, you've basically done everything you can, right? You go down your heavy tank line, you sit there, and you let people shoot at you, and then you win or lose based on your team. But you have a very important job to do because you're holding that line. You have to hold that line to make sure that the other side and your team can do their job. The more damage you absorb, the better. The worst, and you can tell a good mouse driver from a bad mouse driver based on what they do with their tank. If they decide that they're invincible because they're in the mouse, and they drive forward, and they just like saying, "Oh, I can just go like this, and I can drive up, and I'll be fine because I'm in the mouse, and look how much armor I have." Then they're going to get hit here, here, and here with heat, and they're going to die incredibly quickly. It's just going to happen. I mean, like a bunch of tanks at tier 10 have over 3,000 DPM. You have 3,000 health. If one tank's going to take a minute to kill you if you don't use your armor properly. And if there's two tanks, you're down in 30 seconds, so on and so forth. So you cannot do that. You're not invincible. You have to like use your armor to make the enemy make mistakes, right? You want them to shoot at you because you know that you have a better chance of bouncing than other tanks. And when they do, that's when like they've shot, your team has the advantage. So let's take a look at the tanks that lead up to the mouse, because this is the German things that lead up to the mouse are pretty. One thing that's nice about the German tree is there's a lot of tanks that existed and that are really interesting, and there's a few good tanks here. So when we look at the mouse, right, you see the mouse, the Mauschen, VK100-01P, Tiger P, you know, moving down here. So you have a couple ways of getting here. You can either get here through the both of them lead to the Panzer IV-H. So you can either get there through the Panzer II or the Panzer III-5. Now, the Panzer III-5, there's a couple of ways. If you go this way, you play these tanks, you can move up through the Hetzer, and then you can move to the Panzer IV-H. Versus if you go to the PZ2, you can go down here to, you have a couple options. Immediately split off, you go Panzer IIIE which leads to the DW2 and the Panzer 2J. You can go the PZ2G, which leads down to the Lukes. Uh, or and then so you split more with this line, right? So you don't play as much because it leads to more things. I would probably recommend this line just because you once you play the PZ2, then you research these two, you can go this way, you can go this way, this way, and this way from the Panzer 3E. And so what that does is it gives you the ability to go Panzer 4A, which is a lot of fun, Panzer 4D, and then the Panzer 4H. You go the DW2, DK for the other heavy tank line, and you can go Panzer 3 this way for the Leopard line. So you can have the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, Leopard line, E50M line, uh, and the E100 line, as well as the Maus line. If you go this way, you can go to the Hetzer, and then you can go to the Panzer 4H, which does lead down to the Tiger line after this, but you're getting here anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? So it's all about like how much on the other line. So both of them lead this, and both of them get the Tiger. Uh, but that's right. So you're split more. You can choose. You get 2 lines or you get 3 lines. And so I would go with the Panzer II. I think the Panzer II is one of the more fun vehicles. Honestly, I think the line's more fun. These are much more iconic vehicles down here. These are so Panzer II, Panzer 3E, and then of course you're going to go up to the Panzer 4A. So you have to play 2 tier 3s, which is a little bit of a downside. So if all you care about is getting the Maus, you might go this way. The Panzer 4A is an interesting tank, only because it's a tier 4 with a pretty good gun. It's got no armor, but it's interesting. You're not going to spend too much time on these. Or, sorry, it's a tier 3, right, that's why. Yeah. And so the big one is the Panzer 4H. This is pretty similar to a lot of other nations. If you had to compare it to one, it'd be the American, it'd be the M4 Sherman, because it's got that 105 millimeter derp, and it's got okay armor, and it's got okay mobility, and you go around and you derp people with it, and that's what you do. You can switch over to the 7.5 KWK, but it's not going to. I would probably use the 105. It's just like the thing that you do with it. And so then after that, you have the VK3001P. This is going to be a medium tank. We can look at it here. It's your tier 6. It's not anything to write home about. You have 100 millimeters of frontal turret armor, but it's completely flat. And you have 75 millimeters of hull armor, which is also it's mostly flat. You do have an 8.8 gun, 8.8 centimeter gun, which is 88. So you can do some damage with it. It's yeah, but I wouldn't say that this is a standout tier 6. Tiger P. Now this is a tank, and the Tiger P is nice because you have. It's like the heavier Tiger, right? So you have the long 88, which has a 203 penetration at tier 7, which is nice. It's got the DPM, which is nice, and it's got 200 millimeters of hull armor, which is nice. So what a lot of people do is they don't know. They won't shoot at your turret. They'll shoot at your hull, and it'll bounce a lot because you're at tier 7. You have a 200 millimeters of frontal hull armor, and so it's a pretty interesting tank. But honestly, the first tank that I really enjoyed in this line was the VK100.01. This is one of the newer ones, so they switched this line around a lot. This tank is where you start playing like a Maus, and it's really nice, honestly. You have some good armor. Your hull armor is really nice. You have a good gun when you get the 12.8. It's just you got the penetration that you need to deal with tier 8s. You can dab the 2 key if you want to get that 260, which isn't fantastic, but it'll help you against tier 9s. But you have a lot of armor, and the armor is an important thing. And this weak point isn't that much of a weak point. It's very nice. I do prefer this to the Mauschen. The Mauschen, I feel like it's not as good at tier 9 as the VK is at tier 8. The Mauschen, it doesn't do it for me a whole lot. It has the problems, right? Because you already have problems with the Maus, and this it's like it has the same problems but just more problems. But it's not bad. Like you play it the same way you play the Maus. It's just that there's situations that you feel like there's nothing you can do more in this tank than is the Maus, but that's like that's the deal. It's a tier 9 tank. So then you move up to the Maus, of course. So I mean, it's a fun tank. It is. It's one of those tanks that people want because it's so iconic of a vehicle, and I'd say it lives up to what you want it to be. You just can't act like an idiot in it, which a lot of people do. You see a lot of dumb Maus players. The only tank that you probably see more dumb players than the Maus is the E100. And so that's a good thing to talk about. What's the difference between the E100 and the Maus, right? Because they look pretty similar. They're both super heavy tanks, and people are like, man, well, I don't know if I want to go for I wanted the Maus, but I also want to go through the Tiger and the Tiger 2 and the E75 and all these heavy tanks, right? Which is like, I don't know, man. Do I really want to go to the Maus? Because I mean, I don't really care about these tanks as much as I like these, and then the E100. So let's bring up Tanks GG again, and we'll compare the Maus and the. Well, first off, let's take a look at the. Let's take a look at the armor of the E100. I know this is the Maus review, but this is important because a lot of people wonder about this. So we take a look here, and you can see and this is the E100's gun, which has the same penetration as the Maus's gun, 246, but it does have higher damage. So you can see here that you have your lower plate, which is worse than the Maus's. It's a lot larger, and it's less armored. It's only 150 millimeters instead of 200. Top plate is arguably better. It's at a steeper angle. You can see that. And if you turn it, and its turret, turret doesn't have as much of that weak point. Of course, if we switch over to heat, this has heat, then it becomes a lot less effective. This has better heat too. Uh, but your front. So what you want to do is you want to hide the lower hole. So what happens if we angle it, right? Well, if you angle it, you're not as good because you don't have the space armor that the Maus does to block these shots. So that if you angle too much, then you have these spots start creeping up, right? So you can't angle it. So hiding your lower plate is very important, and much more important than the Maus. You have to find stuff to do that because they start shooting you here, they track you, and they go through. Even with regular and standard, you can just shoot them right here and go through. Your turret is nicer than the Maus's if you angle it. So what you want to do with the E100 is basically angle like that and hide your lower plate and angle it like that, and then you can you're in a slightly better position. But your armor is just not quite as good as the Maus's in most situations, I'd say. But your gun does more damage, and so it's better. The gun is better for trading, but a lot of times you're going to need to use HE because you really don't want to bounce the shot that takes so long to load because you only fire 3 rounds a minute. And so a lot of people use HE on this tank to actually deal damage. And so it's honestly, I haven't gotten the E100. I haven't played it yet, so I can't speak exactly to its use as on a personal level. But I have played against them a lot, and I know a fair amount about the vehicle. Uh, so let's just compare the two tanks on their stats other than armor here. So we're going to do this. We're going to say the Maus, and we're going to say the E100. So we look, and we see, let's go base values, and we see that the DPM is slightly higher. It's not almost negligibly higher on the E100. The damage, of course, the penetration is the same. Damage is, of course, much higher, and the rate of fire is much lower. It's 20 versus the reload time is 13.3 on the Maus and 20 seconds on the E100. So moving down here, you can see that also the Maus is gun handling is much better, right? It's 210, which is great. 2.9, which is very bad. 0.36 is much better than 0.4, and even your moving and transfer speed are better. Except, yeah, well, I mean, the turret transverse is much better, and the moving is very slightly better. You also have 1 more degree of gun depression, which doesn't come in a whole lot, but it is useful. So the E100 is faster, but its power to weight ratio is worse, and but it does have better ground resistances, but not by a whole lot. And its turret transverse and track traverse is better, so it's more mobile. And so you can see one thing is that the Maus has 185 millimeters of side armor, and the E100 only has 120, which makes angling a lot nicer. Yeah, when you angle and you over angle, it's a lot more forgiving in the Maus, like we saw when we were looking at that. and you have those 300 more hit points, which do come into effect a lot. So yeah, that's kind of what you're going for. Do you want the bigger gun and slightly more mobility, or do you want to be the mouse? Now, I think if you're going to go down this road, the E100, if you want to do like big derp and that's what you want, I think this tanks do better. I think if you want to do this, you go with the mouse, because the mouse is just like the embodiment of the super heavy tank. This is what it is. Unless you're just like want to play the Type 5 heavy, and then in which case, like, hey, whatever, if that's your jam and you want to HE derp everybody in front of you and never have to aim for weak points, go ahead. Personally, not a big fan of that, but yeah. The only thing is, I do think that the line that leads up to the E100 is better in general, except for the VK. Tier 8, I would definitely rather play the VK than I would the Tiger 2. Tiger 2 has fallen off a lot, but I would probably rather play the E75 than the Maushin. And I'd probably rather play the Tiger than the Tiger P, just because the Tiger, like, it's more iconic, and like, the way that they've played it now with this, the way this gun works is really, very nice. So that's pretty much everything that there is to say about the mouse. This was a little longer than last time. There's probably some stuff I can cut from this and boil it down some more. I am thinking about using some footage at some point, but I don't know how useful that would be unless I just get really good games to show you what the vehicles are capable of. And already, like, I talked for 36 minutes. So like I said though, if in the last video, if anybody has any videos that they want to submit on a tank, just to run this down real fast about the tanks that I have, so you can see. So going to start with the Americans, the Tier 10 American tanks that I have is the T-57 and the E4. I want to get the M48 probably, or the E3 is my next American tank that I'm thinking about going for. I'm closer to the E3, but I do want to get the M48 because I've been having a lot of fun with medium tanks recently. The only German tank I have is the Maus, and that's because I feel it's the only German tank that like, there's tanks I'm interested in, but it's the only one that does something different, or it's like the best of what it does, right? So the Jagdpanzer 100 is pretty nice, but I think I'd rather get the British tank destroyer because, like, well, if I'm gonna go with the big gun, I'm gonna get the biggest gun, right? Uh, the E100, it's like I got the Maus, so I don't know. I'm working my way towards it though. E50M and the E50 are both, like, not as good as some of their competitors. Same thing with the Leopard and the Leopard prototype. And then of course the light tank is definitely not anywhere near the top of all the light tanks. The T100. If I'm gonna get a light tank, I'm definitely going to go for the T100 LT. Speaking of this, I do want to go up this line because I want to get the ISU 152 because it's such an iconic vehicle. So I'm thinking about going up that line as well. I have the Object 26804. I got this when it was the 263, and I was a little disappointed that they switched out my tank and then nerfed it. But what are you gonna do? I'm probably not gonna go for the 26A anytime soon because I have the 140, and these are pretty similar. This is gonna be one of the last ones to go for. Although I do play the T54, so however much I play the T54, if I eventually get here. Of course, I have the 430. K91, I may go for, but I'm probably going to get the 705A, the IS-7, and the Object 277 sooner because I have all three of the Tier 9s here, and I'm working on those. IS-4 also not high on my list. RD, of course, is not going to be super high on my list. I have the Action 10. I do want to get the Super Conqueror, and at some point get the FV405 because it is just a fun tank, and the lineup for it is pretty cool. So even though I don't own the things I don't own, if you want me to talk about them, I can do that. Because, like, the thing about World Tanks that's important is that knowing your tank is like the least you can do, right? Like, if you're gonna play the T30, then and you learn everything there is about the T30, you have done the least amount you can do to try to be good at the game. You have to learn all the tanks, whether or not you own them, that you might face in that tank, so that you know how to combat those tanks. Look at their armor models, decide what you like. You have to know where to shoot them. You have to know what their strengths are. You need to know what the reload times are, so you know how long you have to hit them. You have to know the majority of the tanks in the game in order to play the game effectively. So I can talk about any tank that you want me to talk about. And so yeah, we said that I don't have any French tier 10s yet. I'm not super interested. The Bat Chat I do want to get at some point, but I'm just like light tank. I'd get the 100 LT first. The AMX 30B I'm not a super huge fan of. The Bat Chat's probably the one that I most want. I don't have the Czech tank or the Japanese tanks. I do almost have the Chinese 121. So I'm close to that. If that's one that people are interested in, I'm trying to get. I'm not super great in the Swedish. I really want to be good in the Swedish tanks and Swedish tank destroyers because like they're just really interesting to me. But I have not learned to do the UDES properly yet. Uh, so I need to work on playing the UDES before I move forward. And then of course like I do kind of want to get the Kranvagen, but I do already have the T57 Heavy, and so the T57 Heavy, the Kranvagen, and the AMX-50B are all pretty similar. Like they have differences, but like their gimmick is all the same. So I'm not super. I don't care a whole lot about going down that. And I do want to go down the Italian line, but I have a feeling that the Italian line is really overperforming right now all the way up. So I'm holding off because I don't know if it's going to get nerfed, like especially the 65 and certain like it's just like they're really powerful right now from like tier 6 and up. So we'll see about that. So yeah, I think that's about everything. So like I said, yeah, just let me know what vehicles you think I should go for, what vehicles you want to see, and then send replays if you want to. Just put the replays in the comments if you want them to be featured for a tank. If I, if I think they show what the tank does best, then I will put them in there. All right, I think that's everything.